The Homeowners Association thought they had struck gold when they began building 96 dream homes on a patch of land outside Macon, Georgia. But what they didn't know was that the land already had an owner, and she'd been waiting. Imagine waking up one morning and looking out your window to see new houses standing where your family's fields once were. That's exactly what happened to Marjorie Whitfield, a 62-year-old retired school administrator who'd lived quietly her whole life guarding the property her parents left her. To her, the land wasn't just soil and trees. It was memory, nearly 40 acres passed down from her parents, who had worked themselves to the bone paying it off. Her father used to tell her, "They can build more houses, Marjorie, but they can't make more land." She grew up chasing fireflies through that clay soil, helping mend fences, listening to her father's voice echo through the pines. Even when developers started circling the county, even when neighbors sold off their lots, she held on. Her parents had taught her that ownership meant responsibility. Every year, she paid taxes on time. She kept every receipt, every map, every court document in a fireproof safe. And every few years, she had her friend Samuel Drayson, a local attorney, double-check the title. "Marjorie, you've built yourself a fortress," Samuel told her once over coffee. She smiled faintly. In this world, that's the only way to survive. She was meticulous, not paranoid. She'd seen how people with money and power could twist the rules. She wasn't about to give anyone an opening. Then, one summer afternoon, that fortress was breached. Driving down a back road that bordered her property, she saw a bulldozer chewing into the red dirt. At first, she thought it was county work, maybe road repairs. A week later, she drove by again and saw survey flags, construction trailers, and fresh concrete being poured. Marjorie pulled over and waved to a man in a neon vest. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" "New subdivision, ma'am," he said. "Lakewood Meadows, 90-something homes. Gonna be beautiful." Her heart dropped. 90 homes, on her land. She went home, checked her deeds, and sat at the table trembling, not from fear but disbelief. Surely it was a mistake. Surely someone had checked. But as weeks passed, wood frames rose into rooftops, rooftops into houses, and she realized the truth. They were building a neighborhood on her family's land, and no one had even asked. To most developers, her property was just a patch of inconvenient earth. Too many trees, bad soil, uneven terrain. But to Marjorie, it was priceless. She had walked it barefoot as a child. Her father had been buried on the next hill over. Now, heavy machinery had carved tracks through her inheritance. She told her friends at church, and most didn't believe her. "They can't just build without permission," one woman said. Marjorie pulled out her yellowed folder of deeds and tax receipts. "They did," she said quietly. "And they didn't even check." What she didn't know was that decades earlier, a clerical error in the county office had left her land listed vaguely under unassigned parcels. The Lakewood Meadows HOA, working with Hanover Construction, saw a blank square on the county map and swooped in, assuming it was free for development. By the time they realized the mistake, the foundation had already been poured. To them, it was a small technicality. To Marjorie, it was her life's work erased. As the subdivision grew, she began documenting everything. Every poured driveway, every roof beam, every truck. She logged dates, took photos, even filmed videos on her old phone. Not out of rage, out of discipline, because she knew how the world worked. People with lawyers and power moved fast and assumed the rest of the world couldn't catch up. But she'd been a school administrator for 30 years. She'd spent a lifetime documenting, recording, filing. She knew how to build a case before anyone realized there was one. The HOA's president, Clifford Myers, was the type of man who believed charm could fix anything. Late 50s, square jaw, expensive watch. The kind of leader who thrived on photo ops and ribbon cuttings. He bragged to the local paper that Lakewood Meadows would be the crown jewel of Bibb County. Behind the scenes, he cut corners. "Start fast. Fix later," he told his team. A junior project manager once raised a concern during a meeting. "Sir, there's a parcel still under the name Whitfield." Clifford waved him off. "Paperwork glitch." We'll clear it up after Phase 2. That confidence infected everyone. The HOA believed it was unstoppable. By winter, half the homes were sold. Families were moving in, realtors celebrated, and Clifford stood at the clubhouse smiling for cameras. He toasted champagne with developers and promised homeowners that their property values would skyrocket. Meanwhile, Marjorie watched it all unfold from her car parked a mile away, camera rolling quietly. Her cousin Thomas came by one evening. "Why don't you go to the news? Chain yourself to a tree?" "Because that's what they expect," she said. Noise fades. Paperwork doesn't. Her calm unnerved everyone who underestimated her. Inside her modest kitchen, Marjorie sat with Samuel, spreading documents across the table. "They're trespassing on my land," she said evenly. Samuel nodded. "And they're about to find out what happens when they mess with someone who knows how to keep records." He advised her to stay quiet, let the paper trail do the talking. Together, they drafted a cease and desist letter. When Clifford received it, he laughed. "She thinks paperwork scares us? We've got attorneys, too." He tossed it aside and told Hanover Construction to keep building. That arrogance sealed his fate. Within weeks, Samuel filed an official lawsuit. Whitfield versus Lakewood Meadows HOA and Hanover Construction. It landed on Clifford's desk like a grenade. The complaint included deeds, tax receipts, surveys, and a certified quiet title judgment reaffirming ownership, all under Marjorie's name. Clifford told his board, "This will get tossed out." But privately, even his lawyer looked uneasy. Meanwhile, the first homeowners were moving in, unaware their dream homes sat on disputed land. The Ramirez family were the first to unpack. Victor and Angela had saved for years to buy their first home. When Angela saw the kitchen, she'd cried, "This is where we'll have Thanksgiving." Across the cul-de-sac, Tyler and Lauren Briggs, a young couple expecting a baby, painted their nursery yellow. "Finally," Lauren said, "a home we can grow into." And down the street, Darnell and Monica Price, retired postal workers, planted rose bushes out front. "This is where we'll grow old," Monica told her sister on the phone. They were all living inside a time bomb. At first, rumors trickled through the neighborhood. A woman at the grocery store whispered that someone was suing the HOA. Flyers appeared on mailboxes about legal property disputes when Angela Ramirez found a letter taped to her front door from Marjorie Whitfield's attorney. She panicked. "Victor," she said, trembling, "is this real?" He read it twice. "It has to be a mistake. They wouldn't sell us land they don't own." But that night, neither of them slept. At the next HOA meeting, Clifford smiled confidently. "This woman's claims are baseless. The county won't let families lose their homes." A man in the back raised his hand. "What if she wins?" "She won't," Clifford said sharply. "Trust me." But trust was already fading. By the time Marjorie filed her evidence in court, Lakewood Meadows was unraveling behind its manicured lawns. Some homeowners grew defensive. Others quietly started researching her case. They found the truth: her name, her deeds, her decades of tax payments. She wasn't a con artist. She was the rightful owner. Angela Ramirez called her again. "I don't blame you," she said softly. "But I don't know how to tell my kids we might lose our house." "You shouldn't have to," Marjorie replied. "But I can't let them erase my family's land because someone skipped a step." Marjorie's calm unnerved Clifford more than any threat could have. By the time the lawsuit hit the papers, the entire county was buzzing. Headlines read, "Retired woman sues HOA over 96 homes built on her family land." People whispered about it in coffee shops, barber shops, and at Sunday services. Some called her brave. Others said she was heartless. But Marjorie didn't care. She knew the truth, and the truth didn't need applause. In the quiet of her dining room, she went over her binder again. Photos of bulldozers, signed receipts, survey maps. "They'll try to paint you as a monster," Samuel warned. "A woman trying to kick families out of their homes." "I'm not the one who built on stolen land," she replied calmly. Inside Lakewood Meadows, the tension grew thick. Victor Ramirez stopped mowing his lawn for a week. Too stressed to care, Lauren Briggs cried at night, worried their baby would be born into chaos. Neighbors whispered behind fences, trading theories like gossip. At an emergency HOA meeting, Clifford stood before a packed room of anxious residents. His confident grin looked forced. "Listen, everyone," he said. "This lawsuit is a misunderstanding. Mrs. Whitfield is misinformed. We've offered to compensate her, but she refuses." A woman near the front shouted, "Then why does the county website still list her as the owner?" The room fell silent. Clifford's smile wavered. "Legal paperwork takes time," he said weakly. By the end of that meeting, people weren't clapping for him anymore. Hanover Construction grew nervous too. Their investors started asking questions, and their lawyers advised Clifford to settle. But Clifford refused. He still believed charm and pressure would fix everything. "Don't worry," he told Hanover's rep. "No judge will side with a retiree over an entire neighborhood." He was wrong. Marjorie wasn't just a retiree. She was prepared, patient, and exact. Samuel filed motion after motion, each backed by layers of evidence, old maps, probate records, witness statements from clerks who remembered her face over the years. Every document built a wall that Clifford's lawyers couldn't climb. Still, Marjorie stayed quiet. "I'm not fighting in public," she told Thomas one afternoon. "I'm fighting on paper. That's where they'll lose." When the trial finally began, the courthouse overflowed. Reporters lined the steps. Homeowners filled the benches. Some came clutching their mortgage folders like shields, praying the judge would show mercy. Marjorie arrived in a navy dress, her hair pinned neatly. Beside her, Samuel carried a stack of files thick enough to tip the scales of justice. Across the aisle, Clifford sat stiff in a tailored suit, whispering to his attorneys. The judge, Honorable Patricia Long, called the room to order. "Whitfield versus Lakewood Meadows HOA and Hanover Construction," she said. Opening statements. Samuel rose first. "Your Honor, this case is not about misunderstanding. It's about negligence and greed. My client has owned her land for over 40 years, paid her taxes, and maintained every legal record. The defendants, without consent or verification, built an entire subdivision on her property. That's not progress. That's theft." The words echoed like thunder. Clifford's attorney stood next, smooth and smiling. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge a clerical error, tearing apart a thriving community would harm innocent families. Mrs. Whitfield seeks personal gain at the expense of good people." Marjorie didn't flinch. Samuel leaned toward her. "Let him frame it that way. We've got the proof." Witness after witness came forward. County clerks testified that Marjorie had paid her taxes every year. Surveyors confirmed the subdivision overlapped her parcel line. Exactly. Even a Hanover project manager admitted under oath that someone had flagged the Whitfield name early on and been told to ignore it. Marjorie's binder became the centerpiece of the case. Every map, every letter, every receipt matched perfectly. When she took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She spoke softly, but her words carried. "My parents worked their whole lives for that land," she said. "They taught me to protect it, and I have. I didn't invite anyone to build there. I didn't sell it. Yet somehow I'm the villain for defending what's rightfully mine." Several homeowners lowered their eyes. Clifford's jaw tightened. Then came his turn on the stand. Samuel's questions were surgical. "Mr. Myers, did you verify ownership before construction?" "We relied on our partners," Clifford said, his voice tight. "So you didn't check the county records?" "Our data showed—" "Mr. Myers," Samuel interrupted, "did you or did you not confirm the name on the deed before breaking ground?" Clifford hesitated. The room was dead quiet. "We didn't," he finally muttered. Samuel nodded. "So you gambled with someone else's land?" Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Clifford's shoulders slumped. During recess, Angela Ramirez approached Marjorie in the hallway. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said quietly, "I know this isn't your fault. I just wanted to thank you for not backing down. Maybe this will teach people like him not to walk over others." Marjorie smiled softly. "You deserve better than what they gave you, Angela." By the second week, the HOA's defense was unraveling. Their lawyers tried to claim adverse possession, but Marjorie's decades of tax payments destroyed that argument. Each document was like a nail in their coffin. Clifford grew more desperate by the day. He paced the courthouse hallways, muttering into his phone. Hanover's representatives stopped showing up. The press no longer called him visionary. They called him reckless. When closing arguments came, Samuel stood tall and spoke with quiet fire. "This isn't about paperwork," he said. "It's about accountability. The defendants assumed my client was powerless, that she wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight back. But she did. Because she respected the law when they didn't. She played by the rules. They did not. And today, that difference matters." The room was silent except for the judge's pen scratching notes. When Clifford's lawyer stood again, his voice was smaller now. "We ask the court to consider the families who will suffer. Mrs. Whitfield has her justice. Surely she can show mercy." But the facts had already spoken. Marjorie sat straight, hands folded, her heart steady. She had waited months for this, but in truth, she had prepared for decades. Outside the courthouse that evening, news cameras waited. Neighbors whispered. Some prayed. Some cursed her name. Inside, Judge Long reviewed the evidence for nearly an hour before returning. The tension was unbearable. Marjorie sat motionless. Clifford looked pale, defeated. When the judge began to read the verdict, the room held its breath. Judge Patricia Long's voice filled the courtroom. After reviewing the evidence presented, this court finds that the plaintiff, Mrs. Marjorie Whitfield, has maintained uninterrupted ownership of the disputed property for more than 40 years. Taxes have been paid. Deeds have been recorded. Title has been reaffirmed. The construction of the Lakewood Meadows subdivision was conducted without her consent or knowledge. Gasps echoed through the room. Homeowners clutched one another's hands. Clifford's head dropped into his palms. The court therefore recognizes Mrs. Whitfield as the rightful owner of the property upon which Lakewood Meadows was built, the judge continued. The matter of compensation and damages will proceed in further hearings. Homeowners will not be immediately displaced, but their residency will depend on a resolution between the defendants and Mrs. Whitfield. The words hit like thunder. Lauren Briggs sobbed into her husband's shoulder. Darnell Price stared at the floor, his face hollow. Angela Ramirez closed her eyes, whispering, "Thank God it's over," though she didn't know whether it was relief or heartbreak she felt. At the plaintiff's table, Marjorie sat perfectly still. Then she exhaled slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "Mama, Daddy," she whispered under her breath. "We did it." Samuel rested a hand on her shoulder. "You earned this, Marjorie." Across the aisle, Clifford Myers looked like a man whose empire had just turned to dust. His lawyers shuffled papers, avoiding his gaze. The once proud president of Lakewood Meadows now sat surrounded by the wreckage of his own arrogance. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones waved. "Mrs. Whitfield, how do you feel about families possibly losing their homes? Will you sell the land back? Are you open to negotiation?" Marjorie paused on the courthouse steps, sunlight catching her face. Her voice was calm and steady. "This was never about hurting families," she said. "It was about protecting what belonged to my parents and to me. The HOA gambled with lives that weren't theirs to gamble with. I did what anyone would do. Defend what's rightfully mine." She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply turned and walked away, dignity in every step. That night, Lakewood Meadows was silent. Porch lights glowed dimly. Curtains stayed closed. Some residents cried. Others cursed. Clifford resigned from the HOA the next morning. His resignation letter was short. "I accept full responsibility for the errors made under my leadership." But it didn't save his reputation. Within weeks, his name disappeared from every local committee he'd once led. Hanover Construction distanced itself too, releasing a statement blaming clerical oversight and unverified documentation. Behind the scenes, they called Samuel Drayson to discuss settlement. "We're prepared to offer significant compensation," Hanover's attorney said over the phone. "Enough for your client to transfer ownership back." Marjorie listened quietly as Samuel explained. When he finished, she shook her head. "This was never about money," she said. "They need to understand that shortcuts have a price. Still, she wasn't without compassion. She knew the families were collateral damage in someone else's greed. 2 weeks later, a meeting was organized at a small church near the subdivision. Word spread fast that Marjorie Whitfield herself would attend. When she walked in, conversations stopped. Some people glared. Others looked at her with quiet respect. The tension was heavy. She stood at the front and spoke calmly. "I don't hate any of you," she said. "I don't want to see families suffer. But this land was stolen from me. I couldn't stand by and let that happen. What comes next will depend on negotiations, but I need you to know I'm not your enemy. The people who sold you false promises are—" The room stayed silent for a moment. Then Angela Ramirez stood up, tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Whitfield, you did what any of us would have done. Thank you for standing your ground." Some nodded. Others crossed their arms. But even those who resented her couldn't deny the truth. She had been wronged. In the weeks that followed, Lakewood Meadows became a strange kind of ghost town. On the surface, nothing looked different. Lawns were trimmed, kids still rode bikes, sprinklers still hissed in the mornings. But behind every door, anxiety lingered. Families held late-night talks about mortgages, lawyers, and what they might do next. "We're paying for something that might not even be ours," Victor Ramirez said one night, rubbing his temples. Angela put her hand on his shoulder. "We just have to hold on. Maybe she'll find a way for us to stay." Across the street, Lauren Briggs sat in her baby's nursery, staring at the pastel walls. "We wanted a home," she whispered. "Why does it feel like it's slipping away?" Darnell and Monica Price stopped gardening altogether. 30 years at the post office," Darnell muttered, "and this is what we retire into, a mess someone else made. Property values froze. Realtors refused new listings. The once booming development turned quiet, almost haunted. Marjorie's house, meanwhile, became a symbol. Some drove past to stare. Others left notes on her porch, some supportive, some hateful. She ignored them all. Each evening, she'd sit at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and the court ruling lying beside her fireproof safe. Samuel visited one night to discuss Hanover's new settlement offer. "It's generous," he said. "Enough to ensure every family keeps their home and you still get what's fair." Marjorie looked out the window at the distant glow of the subdivision lights. "Do they understand yet?" Samuel frowned. "Understand what?" "That ownership isn't about greed. It's about respect. They thought they could erase a lifetime of work with a pen stroke. Now they know better." Samuel nodded. "They do." One Sunday afternoon, she invited her cousin Thomas to walk the property line with her. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of pine. They stopped by one of the old iron markers buried near a fence post. "Daddy told me to never let this go," she said softly. Thomas nodded, voice thick. "And you didn't. You honored them, Marge. Both of them." They stood in silence, watching sunlight glint off the rooftops of Lakewood Meadows in the distance. To Marjorie, they weren't symbols of victory or vengeance. They were reminders that patience, vigilance, and truth could outlast even the biggest machines. As weeks passed, the lawsuits shifted into settlements. Hanover Construction agreed to pay damages to both Marjorie and the affected homeowners. The HOA was dissolved, its assets liquidated to cover the fallout. Some families chose to stay. Others sold and moved on, scarred by the ordeal. But no one in Bibb County ever forgot the story of the subdivision built on the wrong woman's land. For Marjorie, victory didn't bring riches. It brought peace. She had fought the system and won without shouting, without spectacle, just quiet resolve. She sat at her dining table one last time, reading the judge's final letter confirming compensation and clear title in her name. Then she closed the file, locked it in her safe, and smiled faintly. Her parents had always told her to hold her ground. She finally understood how much that lesson was worth. In the end, her story became more than a lawsuit. It became a parable whispered across Georgia about dignity, patience, and the power of not being underestimated. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come with noise or headlines. Sometimes, it comes with a woman sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by proof, refusing to be erased. And that's what Marjorie Whitfield did. She didn't shout. She didn't break. She simply stood her ground and made the world remember who the land truly belonged to.